Sorry. Welcome to Through a Glass Darkly Radio. It is June 30th. You're listening to United Public Radio. The intro music was Mark of the Doomslayer by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. And right now, today, I have a very special guest. His reputation is, it doesn't really require an introduction. Whitley Strieber is the author of over 40 works of both fiction and nonfiction. His books, The Wolven, The Hunger, Communion, and The Coming Global Superstorm, as The Day After Tomorrow, were all made into feature films. His sci-fi series, Alien Hunter, became the Sci-Fi Channel series Hunters. In 1985, Whitley had a close encounter of the third kind. It led to the writing of the bestseller Communion. Many people have encountered The Visitors with Whitley, placing it among the most witnessed paranormal events in history. Whitley, welcome.
Hey there. Glad to be here.
It is an absolute pleasure. Okay. So there's been a lot of activity in the past year, at least in 2023, with efforts at disclosure. Unofficial rumor has it, and I'm sure you've heard this too through your channels, but there's kind of been an order that was sent down through various channels to shut it down from somewhere within the military. How do you think folks should try to continue to move forward? Are we going to have to rely on government, or are we going to try to do this ourselves?
Well, I've always thought we had to do it ourselves. And well, let's look at it in a slightly different way. The government, I'm not sure well, first of all, 14 administrations have agreed not to disclose. All of them since Truman on. And I don't think that pressure from Congress is enough. Mm-hmm. It hasn't been enough in the past. There was pressure from Congress back in the 50s. There was pressure from Congress in the 90s. There was pressure from Congress. There's pressure from Congress now. I participated in the effort that the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence was doing to get them to open up about this in camera to the committee in 1998, and they got nowhere at all. They absolutely nowhere. I mean, when I say I participated, I provided information that could be the basis for the intelligence community. I don't think it's up to the Defense Department. I think that there are forces beyond us that are making the decision. And if I know our visitors at all, they are not interested in this coming from our authorities. They're interested in it coming from below, from the people. And we got to figure out how to do that, I think. I think that they're getting a lot closer to us. There's lots more UFO sightings, and more people can just go out, and if they are persistent, UFOs start to show up. There's a guy in San Antonio who goes out most every night, or a lot of nights, not every night, but a lot of nights, and he has anomalies appear in the sky. There's a man in Georgia, John Martin, who's got a YouTube channel where he goes out often, and some of these things he films on YouTube are not explainable, very clearly not explainable. And so it's getting closer. I think if we make an effort, it's going to eventually come from us. I remember very well being told years ago, we will come from within you. And that means from the people.
Yeah, it does seem like there are forces kind of beyond what we would describe as our traditional authority structure. And again, it's hard to decipher between fact and fiction in a lot of this stuff because there's so much disinformation out there. There's
Yes.
But one story that keeps coming up, and again, it could be complete and utter disinformation, is toward the end of The Day After Roswell by Colonel Corso. He says something to the effect of, "We negotiated a type of surrender or a kind of surrender." In other words, during the President Eisenhower's administration, there may have been some deal struck that effectively transferred the reins of power over to something else. Is that something that is kind of fantasy, or is that something you've also heard through channels?
Well, I have I talked to Phil Corso extensively about that very thing for hours one evening, and I mean other things, but that certainly was a central thing that we discussed. And uh, he was an intelligence officer. Therefore, nothing he said, you can be sure, is what he actually was saying. In other words, I'm not going to call Phil a liar, but I am going to say that these guys have got very complex agendas sometimes. And uh, the fact that he was a member of the Shiksheni Knights of Malta kind of adds to the intrigue here, because there would have been hidden motivations having to do with the church, which is heavily involved in this. The Central Intelligence Agency and the church are like this when it comes to this subject. Never forget that, or you can't understand it. And you can't understand. But if you're careful, you'll find that an awful lot of the people who are at the inner edge of this that you can't quite see turn out to be Catholics. And some at the outer edge of it, like me, are Catholics too.
I,
But yeah, go ahead.
I'm a Catholic too. I mean, I'm not, sadly, not actively practicing. However, um, it's funny you mentioned that. I just did an interview with someone named Thomas Ferrario. He worked with Ted Phillips in investigating Marley Woods,
I know
strange
the
places
story.
like that.
Yeah.
And there was an individual who claimed to be from the intelligence community who worked with them. And before the gentleman died, he told them, you can tell them anything I've told you except one thing. You cannot mention the Vatican's involvement and cooperation and collaboration between the United States, or just the broad intelligence community, and the Vatican in a lot of this stuff. So one more thing, I got to figure out a way to say this, but if you have a clearance and you go and do a search on the Vatican on some systems, and I haven't done this, but if you do that and you do a simple search for the Vatican on, say, a Google, uh, the percentages that you're going to get in terms of total search terms are going to be much higher on Google. So even within the intelligence community, allegedly, it is suppressed, that involvement. You can barely find any mention of the Vatican in a lot of this information. So there's definitely some involvement. According to Thomas Ferrario, they trained a lot of the intelligence community in some of the techniques in terms of keeping secrets and things like that. But what else have you heard? Because I think this is an interesting thread that bears mentioning.
Well, the first, and we're going to get back to Colonel Corso. I don't want to lose that. The One of the first, in fact, the first commanding officer at Air Materiel Command was General Nathan Twining, who in 1946 was converted to Catholicism by Padre Pio, the
Yeah.
saint, the levitating saint. And yeah, and since then, if you look carefully, and it's often hard to find the religious affiliations of military officers unless they're open about it, because the military has a tradition of separation from religion on the surface. Under the surface is a different story, but many of them have been prominent in their religious affiliations. So that's a big part of this, and I think it's probably good that it is a big part of it, because we're going to need a some kind of a framework to deal
Mm-hmm.
with this. And this is hard stuff. This is real hard stuff. When you get to getting into face to face with the visitors, you're suddenly in a very serious situation, unlike anything you've ever known before. It is not fun. It is potentially dangerous at times, and it is extremely challenging. And people are not going to be prepared for that. They want it to be fun. They want it to be cool. They want flying saucers to land and funny little men to come out and give them starship plans and all kinds of stuff like that. Uh-uh. This is not about that. This is about something much more powerful and much deeper, which gets me back to Colonel Corso and the situation that happened. And I'm very careful about what I know and don't know, what I believe and what I'm not sure about. And this is just definitely in the not sure about area.
Mm-hmm.
But he did speak of a pact, which we had basically backed off and they had said, you can't do this. You can't do contact. You have to let us do it on our own terms. We will do it, and uh, uh, it will happen, but it will happen in our time, in our way, under our control. And we basically said yes to that. I questioned him about whether or not the abductions had been agreed to. And I did not get, I don't think he had an answer to that question because he talked around it. However, as soon as I began to do research into this, after it happened, it took me about 6 weeks to figure out that I had not gone insane and that it actually had happened. And then another 4 or 5 weeks, I started to do research and met during that early part of that period. I met Bud Hopkins, and then I began to do some deeper research. And Ann and I started talking about possibly writing a book about what had happened. Innocent fools that we were, we thought it would be sort of an interesting kind of secondary book in my life, and because I was a fiction
Mm-hmm.
writer and had just written and published a couple of what I regarded as pretty important pieces of fiction. War Day and Nature's End, both written with a brilliant science guy called Jim Konetko, who's a friend of mine. And so I was kind of moving away from the horror fiction and the science fiction into a more serious level of literature. And I had planned to continue that. And then, so this was kind of a sort of detour.
Mm-hmm.
Out the detour was the rest of my life. I didn't know that at the time. So anyway, what happened was this. In 1986, before anything was public about what I was doing, I got I got a call from a man called David W. Webb. And if you look him up on Wikipedia, you will find, and it's important to put the W in the name if you do this, because there's other David Webbs obviously out there. He was consulting with every alphabet there was, and he was a space scientist of high repute.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to come to our cabin and meet us and get to know us. And I guess he wouldn't have been too unhappy if the visitors had showed up. And he befriended us. He introduced me to an allergist who provided me with allergy medication and gave us epinephrine injectors that we could put all over the house in case the visitors showed up when other people were there and someone had an allergic response to them. And people did come, and the visitors did show up. And one lady, Raven Dana, the first time she was there and one of them touched her, she did have an allergic response. but it wasn't intense enough to use the epinephrine injectors. But here's the point. He knew all about this in 1986. And he was a major guy in the intelligence community and in the space sciences. So, yeah, the government knows about the abductions. It's known about them for years. But also, the other side of this coin is stuff is lost. In other words, and hidden, uh, because paperwork will be offloaded to the to the defense industry. It will be offloaded to companies that keep records, and they will be given control over it. Like I suspect E&G Rotron has got
Mm-hmm.
control over an awful lot of this information and keeps it in the Iron Mountain facility, where they have an entrance to the Iron Mountain facility at their facility in Woodstock, New York. And I think a lot of the old paper records are under their control, and no amount of belly aching from Congress is going to get those released, because there's no legal option there. Freedom of information and congressional demands don't apply to the private sector, and that's been done on purpose. And also, General Exon told me, and others have told me, that pencils up was the rule. In other
Yep.
words, and
Don't write anything down.
I talked about that in them, that many of these meetings were pencils up. In 1988, General Exon told me he was still consulting at Wright Pat all the time, going down there frequently to brief them on what had happened during his tenure, and when the scientific committee was meeting, and he was involved in that in the 50s and 60s. So how are you going to build a record of all of this? The answer is you're not. And why is it like this? Why is it so secret? Gets right back to that agreement, I think. And that agreement is that it's not up to us. And therefore, we are studying it, we are watching it, we are looking at it. We are not keeping records that can be found. And I think that what is going to come out of this disclosure thing that's going on right now is probably, we don't have a thing. We can't find anything, or a few little crumbs, and that'll be it.
What is
Go ahead. Unless the visitors trip the switch. At some point, they're going to trip the switch. And if they trip the switch, then it'll suddenly be a flood of stuff coming out.
Yeah, one thing that may be making some of the powers that be nervous, however you want to define that, I could mean human, I could be non-human, is there are a ton of ancient newspaper articles that are online that are now much easier to search using artificial intelligence, much easier to do correlations and an analysis on, that are starting to make it easier to reconstruct that historical story. And it's not just kind of this machine kind of stuff, like the hard science aspect of it, but also it's kind of a metaphysical, paranormal aspect to it. Like if you look at some of the there's some group, kind of occult groups that were channeling and predicting some of these events. You could go back to Parsons and some of the things that he did before founding the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, being one of the founders of it. And there's a lot of there's a lot of noise, but there's something to that as well, and I'm not quite sure what it is. Why do you think the visitors aren't coming out?
They are very difficult to be with. You remember the book written by Arthur C. Clarke, Childhood's End?
Oh, yeah.
Where these basically supportive, I wouldn't say benevolent, that's the wrong word, aliens can't come out because they look like demons.
Right.
Well, you think the images of the Greys are scary. When you're with them, you feel like you're with demons. It's just appalling. And there are people involved too who are terrifying, absolutely demonic. But are they really? Is that what they are? And a lot of people who've been confronted this will say, "Yeah, that is what they are." But at the same time, I have experienced them many times, and or a number of times. I don't want to say, I don't want to make it sound like they're like living in my bedroom or
Right.
something. But I
Right.
have had significant interaction. It took me a long time to discover that some of these people who are, I think, are hybrids, frankly. You go to a UFO convention, people come up to you and say, I'm a hybrid. And I have to laugh because they've obviously never experienced this. And,
Right.
because you're not going to ever forget one of these people if you encounter them. And I'm not going to say why, because because otherwise there's going to be a bunch of actors out there. But believe me, they are significantly powerful and different from us. So anyway, but I have also discovered that they have been protecting me physically, and they will watch over me. Um, like this lady came to the house who's a very powerful healer, a spiritual healer, who sees auras and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was helping her get her stuff to come into the apartment because she was going to do a hands-on with me, and she had a massage table. And damn if one of the hybrids wasn't sitting there in a car across the street just watching all of this, because it matters. This part of it matters to them. They couldn't care less if an ordinary person comes in, but if it's a psychic or someone with real power, they care. But you know what this did for me? It once would have made me think they are evil and they don't want me to be with her. But now it's a very different thing. It was affirming. They wouldn't have been there if she wasn't the real deal. They were checking her out.
Mm-hmm.
See what I mean? And so she's been very helpful to me. And she's good at what she does. And I don't actually know what that is even, but it works, whatever it
Is it
is.
kind of Reiki
Yeah,
healing, something
yeah,
like
it's
that?
sort of a Reiki deal. And uh, I've got a lot of stuff going on around me that you can't see, and including me, because I'm about, I wouldn't say I'm the least psychic person in the world. That would be disingenuous in the extreme. But I come from a non, this is not a familiar thing in my background.
Right.
A lot of weird stuff happened to me as a kid. A, a Western secular approach, not an approach like a New Agey approach and with, second bodies and spirits and stuff. So I'm not familiar with that, or I wasn't. I am now, because I understand this is where it's about. This is what it's all about. It's not about UFOs and uh, cool technology so much as it is about our souls and what happens to them, and maybe somebody who wants to do things with them that we wouldn't necessarily like.
Yeah, I think you had a whole section. I can't remember which book. It may have been them on soul machines.
Yeah, that's in. It's in, not in them. It's in A New World. Except if you didn't read A New World, then it's got to be in one of the other books. So, but I don't think it's in them.
Or you said something about it, but can you elaborate on that? Because that might be part of what you're talking about.
Well, there's a very interesting um, book, and one of the things that happens to me is as soon as I say something like that, I immediately forget the name of the book. It's by Grant Cameron, and it's called UFO Sky Pilots,
Yep.
and it's basically interviews with people who have flown UFOs personally, who've done it. And
Yeah, you tried to steal one, didn't you?
Of course I did. I was in it, and certainly I was immediately thought of that, and I heard this chuckling behind me, and I decided to sort of not go there any farther down that road. I don't know what was in me. I was not in a situation where I could easily turn around and move. Uh,
But that's
that
common too with experiencers. There's like someone over your left shoulder or something like that. I think former CIA Jim Semivan kind of, I think, mentioned something like that too.
Yeah, he did. He had that sort of experience. Yeah, Jim's had intense experiences. He and his wife. Um, he's such a sweet guy to end up in this world. In any case,
He's Catholic. He's Catholic too, I think.
he is. He is exactly. He's Catholic. The Catholics used to levitate back in the Middle Ages, and now we're not levitating anymore. We're just doing other weird stuff. I don't know what it is about us. In any case, so where was I? Oh yeah, UFO
Soul
Sky Pilot.
machines, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Believe me, getting there. So he talked about how they would put their hands on a sort of dashboard, and it would feel to them like their souls had entered the machine, had become they'd gone out of their body and into the UFO skin of the UFO itself. And I was absolutely amazed when I got that book, because I have one very fragmentary memory of doing that. I did not do it in the situation that we were just talking about. I sat in a chair, and I did not have anything to do with the flying of that thing. I mean, after thoughts that they had detected, I'm sure they had no interest whatsoever in my getting control of it. But in any case, I thought to myself, I remember I'm telling you, all I remember is I put my hands on this console and I became the UFO. I came out into it, and I could go, I could just I became a real go devil. I could go anywhere, and it felt wonderful. And that's all the memory I have. But then I read this book of his, and story after story tells the same thing. And I think to myself, I've hardly spoken about that. I don't think I maybe ever have. And now here are all these people talking about the same thing. There's something there. And then that's when I say that the soul can become part of a machine. And in my experience, and in these people's experience, it's not a bad thing at all. I guess if you become part of the UFO and you can't stop, and it turns out to be like a bus or something, you'd be pretty pissed off, it would be a bus between worlds, but still it would be a bus, and that would be disappointing, a real come down. I mean, for no more movies, no more of this, no more that, no more love, no more just going back and forth all the time. Be too bad.
Yeah, you're familiar with Lynn Buchanan, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen him in years, but I am familiar with him, sure.
He relates an experience. What's that?
Hasn't he passed on, Lynn?
No, he's still around.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. I am too.
Yeah, he's had an experience where he kind of woke up in one, and there were a bunch of other people who had in a UFO, and a bunch of other people had been abducted and were kind of just in a daze. And there were different. There was a gray. There's other larger entities who were looked at him like he was a lion, and called in the grays to kind of come to protect them. And he claims he flew one around a little bit, and they asked him, and he had to get this through hypnotic regression. He independently had his team at Fort Meade when he was doing remote viewing. He just gave them numbers, and they all reported the same experience that he didn't tell them. And apparently he had been recruited, but he was to be a pilot. But he was told that if he said yes, because he's like, okay, well, how do I bring my family, this and that? And they said, you can't bring your family. You could never come back. So he barely remember. He didn't remember that at all until hypnotic regression. So there's a lot going on underneath the surface that we don't we don't fully
Yeah,
understand.
we know. And of course, there are a lot of people who did say yes, I'm sure.
Who've
So
disappeared.
why would they need us? And apparently they do, or they maybe it's not that they need us, but that they want us, and um, which is fine by me. I mean, I don't. I see them as being the main thing that concerns me is soul predation. That there may
Hmm.
be at least some of them who want our souls and want to do something with our souls that I don't think we would want. And that troubles me. It troubles me significantly. But I don't think that's the whole story either. Because if that was the whole story, I think we would be in a different situation than we are. There's one, in them, there are 11 cases analyzed of abduction cases. They're analyzed literally in a whole new way because,
Hmm.
my wife, Anne, and I published um, the communion letters, which is 115 letters from the 4,000 that she kept that are collected now at Rice University. Um, we didn't know as much about this as I do now. And so
Hmm.
in them, I took 11 of those letters, which are a spectrum of different types of experience and different types of encounter, and analyzed them very deeply. And in one of them, it's a man. I know him pretty well. I mean, we've corresponded, and even quite recently, he was in Australia, and he's an Australian. He's an artist and a musician.
Hmm.
He comes home one night at 2 o'clock in the morning. 2 o'clock in the morning. He's tired. He's been working on a song in his brother's music studio until late. He gets ready for bed, lies down in bed beside his wife, and as he put it, I cease to exist. He had a type of experience which is known in the psychological community as it's where your head appears to explode, and it's a type of trance that happens just before falling asleep sometimes. And so he
Hmm.
had that happen. And of course, he knew nothing about the fact that it was a known form of psychological experience. So it scared the living daylights out of him. And he, woke his wife up, and, they were scared to death by this. And they got up and they had coffee. And uh, I guess if you have coffee down under in the middle of the night, you go to sleep instead of stay awake. I don't know. Or maybe they had decaf. Didn't say anyway. And then they go back to bed, and this sound comes over the house. This wah 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 sound over the house. And the next thing he knows, something is pulling him. Some invisible force is pulling his soul up out of his body toward whatever is above the house. And he's desperately trying to stay in his body. And finally, his wife gets on top of him, and they struggle with this screaming. And she's trying to hold him and shake him and keep him connected to his body and soul, connected together. And this thing is drumming wah wah above him. It goes on all night from 2:30 in the morning until dawn, when the sound gradually disappears. That was someone trying to get that guy's soul. Had to be. And what the hell is that about?
Do
Is
you
that
think
out?
there are some? Do you think there's some forms of abduction that are essentially that, where they pull out your
Yeah.
soul and you know?
And maybe they put another soul in, and your spouse notices you're kind of weird, and then who knows? I mean, it just It's incredibly creepy. And who knows how many people have not stayed in their bodies, have lost that battle. And that gets to the question of what is a body anyway? Are these things communal property of some kind? Or I feel like my body belongs to me.
Right.
But who is me? Is this the same me that was here 2 weeks ago or 6 years ago? I don't know.
Your body isn't. You've replaced all the cells since that
All
point.
the cells have been replaced in the body, exactly. But what about the soul? Maybe the soul has been replaced many times. I just don't know what I'm getting at here is we don't know what this is about. And people say, well, we're ready. The secrecy is stupid because we're ready. And I say, no, we're not. We don't know what's going on. Therefore, we don't know whether or not we're ready. We don't know.
Do you think someone in the U.S. government has a relatively comprehensive picture? Or do you think they're also as much in the dark as we are?
I know that there are people in that complicated and very strange organization that we laughingly call our government, who have never come close to the surface. They're way deeper than the David Grushes and the Lou Elizondos of the world. And yeah, I think some of those people know a lot of things. I think David Webb was connected to some of those people probably because he knew an awful lot of stuff back in 1986. I don't know who they are. I would not say, but I do think they're out there. And I've had intimations from time to time talking to people who are a little deeper on the inside that there may be other deeper layers. And I think it could very well bleed off into direct interfaces between us and whoever is pulling the puppet strings, manipulating the puppet strings, where there are decision points and policy being made at a level that's way above top secret and way above the president. And that gets back to the agreement with Eisenhower, if that really happened.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at all the chaos in international affairs, you can't see how any rational leaders operating with any foresight whatsoever could have steered us into everything that's going on right now. Like it seems almost as if by design, but I know humans are not. I mean, as you well know, humans are not that sophisticated to be able to pull off a conspiracy, but at
No,
just multiple levels.
I know plenty of conspiracy theorists who think there's a cabal, and I think to myself, I think there probably is, but I don't think it's run by humans.
There may be many, but it's like herding cats, right? There may be many, but they're herding cats. They all have different interests. Those interests diverge. It's not a stable kind of group of people who are their input in the decisions.
Even looking at my own experience with the visitors, I have seen grays. I have seen the dark blue short figures that seem to work with them. I have seen tall whites. I have seen a Nordic, and I have seen human beings who were connected with them, with the grays. Now, you put all that together, and you think to yourself, there's a lot of genetic manipulation that goes on in this. So it's possible that these are all expressions of the same mind. We don't know the answer to that question. But if these are all different species that come from different realities or different planets, even, the policy issues that must be involved must be incredibly complex because they all have different agendas. They all have different ways of perceiving reality. They must. Because, we think that everyone sees the world the way we do. Well, a bee doesn't see the world at all like we see the world. And when you look at the grays with those big black eyes, those eyes are not working like these eyes. Therefore, Their whole perceptual system is delivering reality to them in a different way than ours is to us. Therefore, we have no idea what they see when they see the world. And I would suspect it goes both ways, that they don't have any idea what we see when we see the world either.
Now, when you interact with them, you explain this extreme feeling of disquiet. Uh, just if you could even put that into words, how would you describe? Let's say someone who's never interacted with these beings, at least via their memory. What might it be like? I know it's a hard question, but
No, it's not actually. It's the thing I'm thinking about often. You feel incredibly naked and in a very vulnerable way. Have you ever had a dream when you were a teenage boy or girl? Everyone has these dreams where you're out in public and you discover you're naked and nobody else is.
mm-hmm.
That's how it feels to be with them. I'll never forget one morning back in February of 1988, I had bargained with them to have a meeting. And incredibly, I felt like I was talking to myself in my head, but they were hearing this. And they showed up one morning just before dawn in February. And as I went down into the woods to meet with them, I heard this voice that sounded like the voice of a child say in this very sort of funny way, creepy way, "He's naked." And that made me feel vulnerable. I was actually wearing a robe, slippers, and pajamas. I wasn't not naked, but I was certainly not normally dressed. And then I came up on a little rise behind our cabin in upstate New York. I could see down through the naked woods to a clearing where I'd originally been abducted from, I think. And there was this dark shadow in the clearing, and it was making a kind of noise that I associate with these things when they're hovering. And there were some figures, I could see some dark figures beside it. And I paused because I was thinking, wow, this is for real. This has worked. And I hear in my head this voice go, "Come on, come on." And that made me not come on, because I immediately thought to myself, I've got a wife and child sleeping back in that cabin. If I go down there and I never come back, what happens to them? Or if I go down there and this is really about them, I can't help them. I'm separating myself from the people I'm pledged to protect and love, and to whom I have given my vows, uh, to my wife and implicitly to my child. So I didn't go down. I turned around. And as I was walking back, there came above the woods 3 cries, the most extraordinary sounds to this day I have ever heard in my life. Cries of woe, disappointment, loss, acceptance. They were the most emotionally rich sounds I have ever heard, but they were so perfectly spaced and so even that it sounded like the voice of a perfect machine that was more emotionally complex than a human being. That's what it sounded like. And in those days, that was very mysterious.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, I don't think we're too far from being able to create something like that ourselves. Because I think what I was dealing with there was a highly sophisticated level of artificiality, of artificial consciousness or of consciousness that's projection into the physical world was essentially artificial. I went back in the house and sat down on my bedside and thinking to myself, have you made a mistake, or is this the right thing to do? Because you've either wrecked contact, or you have saved your own life and your family. Because I don't know what if they took me away and I never came back. At that moment, something I could not see or could barely see came pouring into the room like a like a semi-visible or presence. And the next thing I knew, I'm walking, kind of gliding along in this strange room with these very tall, spindly forms sticking up into the air. And I don't know where the hell I am. It's like a real thing. It's like I'm gone there. I'm not here anymore. I'm not in my bedroom. I'm in this other place. And I'm moving. And then I look up and I see a very familiar desk. I realize I've been returned to my baby body. I am in my mother's office when I was like a tiny baby. And I'm gliding along like this because I think they've taken me back and are having me relive with my adult consciousness the moment I first walked. And they're telling me, this is the communication. You're a baby, but you still took your first step. And I think we're taking maybe a third or fourth step now. And soon, when we're confident that we really can walk this walk, as well as talk the talk, which we've been doing for years, when we can also walk the walk, that's when they will show up and say, yeah, okay, come and join us, for better or for worse.
Do you have a sense for what their motivations are? I mean, we talked a little bit about, again, the group that you have interacted with. But again, I don't even, it's hard to tell if it's one group, right? Is it one group?
Oh, yeah, God knows what it is. I know I've interacted with more than one group. I've interacted a lot with the Greys, and there's those other figures that are with them. I've interacted somewhat with the Tall Whites, and in a particularly extraordinary experience. And I had a long conversation with one of the Nordics people, who I'm certain was exactly what he claimed to be, for various reasons I'm not going to go into. My big takeaway from him is, if you start a war with the Greys, they will never let you win and they will never let you stop fighting. And I thought to myself, the way the Greys think, like a military unit, it's not like a whole world. They divide everything up into the vibration of it's giving them. So that means like the Air Force is one entity, the Navy's another, the Army would be another, Catholicism would be another religious community would be another, an army in another war, another country would be another. And so that's how they think. And then they're not very individualized. They think in terms of communities, and they think of all these communities as separate. And that's fortunate because the Air Force has shot at them. And I think the Air Force is in a war with them and they can never stop fighting. And the Navy's much more willing to spill the beans because they're not fighting them. They're not in trouble. And the Air Force keeps its mouth shut because it is. So and that's kind of an aside. Oh, God. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
I'm still here. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I temporarily lost the image. Okay. All right, there you are. I'm sorry. I brushed my computer and all kinds of different windows opened up, and I didn't know where I was anymore. So wait a minute, where were we? Now I've lost that thread too.
So the way that you didn't say hive mind, but that's kind of what I'm taking away from it.
No, it's definitely a community of individuals, but they don't think in terms of an individual. In other words, they think together, but they feel individual. I'm pretty sure, because The woman who came, and the communion lady who came, she lived with us for a while, for weeks, 6 weeks or so. And we didn't see her. I mean, she didn't sit across the dining room table from us, but she definitely was in the house a lot. And she had a definite independent. She was definitely an independent entity. It's not a hive mind. It's a communal consciousness that shares a lot of different minds, and each individual has a mind. I think that's the best way to look at it. Each individual has their own mind, but their consciousness is communal. We may be that way too, but we just don't know it.
No, it's called the internet.
Well, yeah, actually, we're building that. We're sort of building toward that. And if the internet ever enters these heads, then we'll be probably the same place they are.
Yeah, I think I alluded to this, not just nuts and bolts, but this metaphysical aspect. So there's a lot of, when you go back into the history, there's a group of people called BSRA. Are you familiar with them?
No.
So it's a group, I think a European group back in the 40s, before all these flaps, they would establish communication. They're also tied, and I think I definitely want to ask you about this. George Gurdjieff, that name keeps coming up over and over and over again in the literature, and I know you have some history. Yeah, can we talk about that? Because I know nothing about it, but it keeps coming up over and over again.
Well, I have history, long history. I've been involved with the Gurdjieff work for 60 years. I'm on the outs right now. I'm out. I've been thrown out of my work group, or I left it, I should say. But that happens to me all the time. I'm the guy who gets kicked out. That is part of what I do in life, just in general. So eventually I'll probably get back in again. But right now I'm kicked out, at least from the New York Foundation. And maybe I'll be back. Maybe I'll try to get them. I'm going to England in September for a while, and maybe they'll take me in. But in any case, the idea of the Gurdjieff work is that we're not awake, that we're machines, and but the problem with it is that Mr. Gurdjieff was very evasive about what it meant to wake up. He was very clear about the fact that we were asleep, and that we were essentially living mechanically, because we're all only reactive. There's no will, there's no active level. And that's quite true. I mean, if you think of the way you live, you're all reacting to everything. You're not acting independently at all. You're not generating your life. Your life is coming to you. And so, I've done that. I've done the Gurdjieff work for a long time. And back in 85, it was late 85, I guess. No, it couldn't have been late 85. It was sometime in early 86 when I was beginning to communicate with them successfully. I asked them why they had come.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, we saw a glow. And I thought, oh, that's a glow of cities and so forth, and it's aliens. And that was where my mindset was then. Then Annie passes away in 2015. God bless that gorgeous and glorious woman. And I soon get back in touch with her. And I wrote a book about this called The Afterlife Revolution. And anyone who here does not believe the soul exists has been duped. And you need to undupe yourself, because it does. So anyway, at one point, I'm at a conference, a William Henry conference in Nashville. Mm-hmm. And this lady comes up to me and says, I just heard, she knew Anne, and she says, I just heard Anne's voice say, tell Whitley I can see him when he's in the chair. And that immediately had meaning for me, because I meditate. I do this exercise called the Gurdjieff people call it the sensing exercise. I call it the integration exercise because it integrates soul and body. Every night, I've been doing it since I started in the foundation in 1969. And I realized that's the glow. When you do that exercise, when you move your attention onto your body and away from the flow of thoughts, you literally glow. You set up a glow. And what they saw was this glow coming from this little cabin out in the woods. Because I did it every night at 11 at the cabin. I did it every night at 11 in Manhattan too. But they could see it because I was all alone out there, and there was just this one little guy glowing in the, and they came to investigate, and that's what the abduction was about.
Did you get a sense for where they came from?
Where did they come from? Oh my.
I know there's no answer to that, but at least I don't think there is. But
no, but there's
speculate.
There is a. There was a very interesting short article in the New Scientist last week. I think I've got it right here. Yeah, it talks about, it's nothing to do with aliens, and they're still in the space of this is total nonsense, but it points out that time may not exist, that it may be that the illusion of time arises out of quantum entanglement, that we're entangled with essentially a clock, and that's why we perceive time. And if you weren't entangled in that way, then the universe would seem static, and you'd be looking at it from the outside. And I think that's where they are. I think they see it from the outside. I discussed that extensively in A New World, and I think that nothing is really ever new for them for that reason. And I think one of the reasons they may be here, and why my wife, who knew, she was something else. I mean, she knew so much about this that from the beginning. Why my wife called the book Communion is because there's a sharing of our sense of the new. For you and me and our listeners, every second is always new. Always new. For them, nothing is ever new until they can engage with and enter and live in us. Then suddenly the world is new again. And maybe they lost that newness, that sense of newness a long time ago. And they're here for sentimental reasons. They want it back. And we're the ticket. That might be part of it. And it might not be that all of them have that same agenda. But I think the Greys, in part, the Greys have that agenda.
Now, you mentioned a little bit earlier, I didn't really follow up, but you had a communication with a Nordic.
Yeah.
When did that where and when did that happen?
It happened,
what was
It happened during the research period in 1986. He called me on the phone out of nowhere, and he knew all about me and my name and what I was working on and everything. And I had a private number. I mean, only 6 or 7 people even knew the number. And because I'm a writer and I don't like to get phone calls. And this was before the internet was. I don't think there was even email at that time, or if there was, I wasn't aware of it. Stuff like internet relay chat would come along a few years later, so probably not even email. No internet, I don't think. And suddenly we get this call from this strange sounding man. And I tried to get the phone company to trace the call, and they couldn't do it. And so I got a detective who specialized in that kind of thing involved, and he did do it. He succeeded. And that's why I know the man was legitimately not of this world. And I'm not going to say anymore, and I'm sorry to leave you all curious. But
Yeah.
there's nothing else I can do right now except to say that you have to trust the fact that I'm pretty sure I'm right. Uh, and he basically talked to me about the danger of the Greys and of getting too close to them, of getting into a fight with them, as I talked about earlier, and to that if you're going to succeed with them, you have to never forget who you are. You have to keep your own counsel, and you cannot give them more space than you have to, or they will take it all. And what he was really talking about is that you're dealing here with not something necessarily sinister, but something that is so psychically powerful that it's like, we're an ant and it's an elephant. And we might really like each other, but the ant had better be damn careful and the elephant had better be damn careful in a different way, or something's going to go wrong in that relationship. Uh, uh, and I think that's kind of where we are with the Greys. They're a great, big, ancient, immensely powerful presence who is kind of reining itself in as best it can in an effort to build a relationship with us that can give it some benefit that it wants. And that would be our sense of discovery. In April of 1977, in Science magazine, the American magazine, two scientists, I believe an astronomer and a cosmologist, D.B.H. Kuiper, who discovered the Kuiper belt, and
Mm-hmm.
Mark Morris, who might have been a physicist, I'm not sure, but Kuiper was obviously an astronomer,
Mm-hmm.
published a little piece that has a sort of opinion piece that if aliens were here, they would keep themselves hidden because the only thing of value that we would have for someone who was so capable as to come here would be the sense of the new, that what we had in terms of our culture and in terms of what we were doing to them would be new, and that might be the only thing we had of any interest to them whatsoever, on the theory that none of our technology would be of any significance to them. But that might be, and I think Kuiper and Morris were dead on right. And I've often thought, who knows? I mean, in those days, there were a lot of scientists who were working on this inside in this program that Stanton Friedman called Majestic 12 in the early days, that were in the scientific fields working on this. Maybe those guys actually knew that for certain. And they published their article as a speculation when it's not a speculation at all. I don't know. But I think it's correct. I
Yeah,
think that,
Friedman, he was an interesting character in the sense that, he was an employee or a contractor of McDonnell Douglas, right?
well, I've often wondered why he lived in Canada and why he became a Canadian citizen, because, of course, if you're in the intelligence community in the United States, you can't propagandize the American people legally. But it's a
Right.
different story if you're working in an intelligence operation from abroad, a friendly one in particular, like Canada. But Stanton did a lot of good work. He was a fine man in every respect. He really died with his boots on. I believe he was in an airport when he died.
Yeah, he was racing to catch a flight and had a
Yeah,
cardiac event. Yeah.
right.
I think he knew more than he could say. It's not that he was trying to hide anything, but I think he knew a lot
No.
more than he could say.
Yeah, I think that's well put. I think he probably did. And as I say, he was enormously helpful to me at the beginning. And uh, he was always on my side, even when all the MUFON people were trashing me, and Bud Hopkins was out beating the Whitley Strieber to death drum because he was pissed off at me, and all that was happening. Stanton, he was always on my side. I mean, he wasn't he was not negative. I would say Stanton wasn't he was neutral, but in my case, he was never negative like the others were. In
Yeah,
fact,
it's
I'm
just the
still,
facts. Just the
yeah,
facts.
yeah, I'm still sort of an outsider when it comes to MUFON, the national MUFON. They have not forgotten. And Bud Hopkins got upset basically because my book was so successful, and he had a book out at the same time, and we were planning to publish them simultaneously. And something I don't know what I think my publisher did this on purpose, but they told me that they gave me a publication date, and then the next thing, and I sent Bud a letter saying what the publication date is and outlining all these things I thought we should do together and stuff. And he gets the letter on the same day the book is published, which I didn't know. I mean, it was published weeks before they told me they were going to publish it. But Bud did not believe that, and I can't blame him. I mean, it made it look like I was trying to shine him on. He got angry because we worked together, and he trusted me. And I
Mm-hmm.
told my editor, I said, you ruined my relationship with this man, and I love him very much, and he's a very good man. And they just blew it off. What do they care?
Do
They
you think
wanted.
anybody from the outside gave your publishing company a little nudge in order to intentionally stir
I
things
have.
up?
I've often wondered about that. Did they get some kind of a nudge that made them fear the book would be suppressed unless they got it out right away? Or did someone from somewhere say to them, hey, get this thing out there right away or it might not get out at all? I have no idea, but something certainly was going on behind the scenes, or it wouldn't have happened like that. The books just showed up at bookstores. It hadn't even been sold in yet. They suddenly got these boxes of books from William Morrow and Company that came out of nowhere, totally outside of the normal system. And fortunately,
Yeah.
the book was intriguing, and they put it up to see what would happen, and sold like hotcakes. Because what we now know, but didn't know then, is the book was initiating contact because of the big eyes on the cover. Everyone remembered these people would see the book and think, oh my God, it wasn't a dream. They are real. Millions of people. And this was not the words in the book so much as that face was the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of contact. And Anne and I initiated contact of all the damn things to do with your life. We had no idea what was happening. None. If I had known that some huge thing like that was happening, I would have been terrified. I would have frozen solid. She wouldn't have. She would have with it because she was like that. But the other thing that she did, she saved all these letters that are now at Rice University. Those
Mm-hmm.
letters are the record of contact. They're the best record on the planet of what first contact was like. And now they're being digitized. And so what a precious resource she created. She was amazing. She called the book, she's the one who decided the book should be called Communion.
Now
She,
I had
oh, go
okay.
ahead. No. Oh, well,
I
she read every word of the book. Here's someone, do I do anything about these questions that keep coming up? Because there's this guy.
I'm only if I ask you directly, but I'm
Okay.
going to read this out loud and I know you have an anecdote about it because I've read about it, I've heard about it, but have you seen the Men in Black, either kind of the weird alien version that people typically talk about, these gaunt kind of figures, or human?
Now, I've had a lot of experience with this from the human side, and not a lot of it I'm comfortable talking about. But as far as gaunt aliens, they're all gaunt. Greys are gaunt. That's how they roll, at least in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the I'm trying to think which one. I've talked about one of these experiences and not the other, and I'm not sure which is which and
This
why.
is the one with your garage. I think there was like these two men and a male and a female showed up.
Oh no, that's not the girl. No, those weren't men in. Well, I guess they were in black actually. Now that I think of it, that was when they put the implant in my ear,
Yeah.
which has turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me because I work with it every day of my life now. I couldn't write without it. I had this genius kid in England who helped me work on them. This 22-year-old girl who I don't know what she is. She must have an 200 IQ or something. And I happened to. She showed up on my website, and I met her, and I stayed with her family for a few weeks while I was working on them. And uh, she really was almost better than Anne in terms of this. But at the same time, I also had the implant. Then she blew me off because she didn't want to work on it anymore. I mean, she's a kid. She's got other things to do. She wants to be an artist or something. And I think she thought I was sweet on her, which I wasn't, but that's another story. Anyway, the kid went away, and the implants taken over the new book big time, more than ever before. It just, when I'm writing, it used to be at 3 o'clock in the morning, I would sort of have these sessions with it and plan the next day's workout. Now, when I'm writing, it's like my mind becomes huge.
Hmm.
I've become much bigger minded than I am normally, and because the implant is turned on all the time, and those people put it in. And what happened was this: it was May of 1989. It was 11 o'clock or so at night. We were at the cabin. The windows were open because it was a warm May night, and suddenly we had a shale gravel driveway, and suddenly I hear crunching in the driveway of a car appearing. Now, two things were wrong. Well, three things were wrong. A, it was there at all. B, there were no lights. C, it had gotten past the big, huge gate that was locked. So bad news on three levels for sure. And you don't want that back in the woods all by yourself with your wife and kids at night at that
Hmm.
hour. Uh, Being a Texan, I was gunned up, of course. I had
Nothing wrong with that.
this Texan is definitely capable of using guns. Remember that if anyone wants to come around me, I'm still gunned up. So, in any case, uh, I had a little gun, they called an AMG backup in the drawer beside the bed, and a really serious shotgun, a Benelli riot gun under the bed, loaded with slugs. And this riot gun was going to be definitive to anyone who got shot by it. Let me put it that way. The backup, not so much, but definitely
Hmm.
the riot gun. So I hear all of this, and I'm thinking, I also had a bank of switches beside the bed, which are still there in the cabin, by the way. I've been there recently. And you turn on all the switches at once, and floodlights go on all around the whole cabin, floods everything. So I'm turning to hit the floodlights because I've just heard the sound of the car. And as I turn, I see at the end of it, coming in the door, which is at the end of the far side of the room, coming toward me, a man and a woman. And so, forget the lights. I'm going for the Benelli. And the next thing I know, they're beside the bed. Then I'm on my right side, facing my wife, who is sound asleep. I cannot move. I'm blind. I cannot see a thing. And a very strong, I presume the man, is pushing my head down like in waves. And the woman's speaking very softly and quietly and kindly. Oh, and before I reacted, I heard a voice in the backyard, a male voice say, "Condition red." And the man and the woman were indeed wearing black. And that was the implant was put in. It was put in that night. A day or so later, I began to feel it in there. I went nuts, of course, because I'm Annie. I say it's a tracking device. She says nobody cares whether or not you're going down to the 7-Eleven to get some beer. So therefore, it's not a tracking device. Don't take it out. Let's figure out what it's there for. I bore that for a couple of years until the mid 90s. Uh, and uh, then I met a doctor. We moved to San Antonio. We lost the cabin. We moved to San Antonio. I ran out of money and uh, moved to San Antonio, my hometown. And I met a doctor who I thought to myself, I'll ask him. And he said, you have to promise me. She'd said, no, don't go near Roger Lear with this. Don't, absolutely not. But here now it's years later, and I'm saying we still don't know what it does. We could at least learn something about it if we take it out. She says, okay, I'll let you try one time. You try one time, and that's all.
Mm-hmm.
And she ran this show, you understand. I mean, you know, she said to do, I did. So this doctor, Dr. Lerma, I believe his name was, says, yeah, sure, it's a little cyst, and I'll pop it out. It's nothing to it.
Famous last words.
Right. Well, he knew I'd written communion,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, he didn't make a connection. He didn't know anything about alien implants or anything like that. So we're at his office. We've got it. We're videotaping it, and running the videotape, and the videotape's on my website, by the way, and it's been in that Travel Channel documentary too. So it's around. It's definitely not lost or hidden or anything. So he opens up a little incision here, and Ann's looking at it. He's looking at it, and you see Ann say, it's a white disc, which it was. And he touches it with the edge of his scalpel, and it shoots down into my earlobe on its own. And at that point, he realizes he's trying to take out an alien implant, and he's definitely out of there. He says, I can't do anything about this without taking your ear off. But he got a little sliver of it, and he puts a suture in it and sends the sliver to a lab. And we go home. 2 days later, there's this burning sensation, and it goes from here back up to where it is right now. And the lab calls the doctor and says, is this a practical joke? And he says, no, it came out of a patient. And because the tech, I mean, normally they don't call it, they send a report.
Right.
Says it's a piece of metal, and it has motile cilia that are moving, attached to it, adhering to it. And he said it's a piece of technology of some kind. And then years pass. Still, my ear turns red every once in a while. Oh, I was at Southwest Research with Bill Mallow, the head of material science there at the time, and it turned bright red in his office. And we rushed across the campus to a signals acquisition laboratory.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat in the lab, and apparently they got a signal, but they said the lab's classified, so we can't tell you anything about it. So, but 20 years pass, and I was in those days, I was still being invited to the San Antonio Book Fair every year. That ended when a guy from Kirkus Reviews, which is, you know, like a super conventional thinking kind of organization.
Yeah, you can pay them to give you a review. That's kind of the
I wouldn't waste my money. I'm not going to get a good review
right.
from Kirkus Reviews. Forget it. So anyway, he became head of the San Antonio Book Fair, and that relationship ended. But this was before that. And I was signing books and giving a talk. I loved that fair. It was so fun to go to. I hated being thrown out, but I'm thrown out of a lot of things as part of my life. So anyway, Bigger G Foundation being a recent example.
Yeah. Why does that? Well, we'll get back to that.
Why does that happen to me? I'm bothersome. Yeah. I'm a very bothering person.
I don't get that. I don't get that from you. It feels like something's sabotaging you.
You're not someone sitting at a book fair and saying to himself, this guy is a bullshit artist. I don't want him on my book fair. Get rid of him.
Isn't that what fiction writers do?
Well, I'm not writing fiction anymore, am I? I'm
Yeah,
writing
that's
things
fair.
they
That's fair.
think are fiction that
Right.
aren't fiction. That's the
Right.
problem. And as far as the Gurdjieff people are concerned, I really threw myself out because I just felt like I was dealing with people who weren't serious about waking up, and I didn't want to waste my time. Um, so, but that's only temporary. I'll find my way back in the foundation. I've been thrown out of it more than once. I quit more than once. You've been in 60 years and you have a personality like mine. You're going to get thrown out and quit more than once, period. So, in any case, uh, I'm signing books, and these two guys come up and they say, "We just want to tell you that the signal that we acquired," and I knew they had because they did say they acquired a signal, "is still under study and is the most unusual signal that we have ever acquired. And we can't tell you more." And they turned around and left. So the implant, it sends out and it also receives. And I have learned to use it. And I do use it. And it is an excellent research tool and also a wonderful foil kind of for ideas. It does not give me ideas, but if I can, it's like a discussion. And when the genius kid blew me off and wouldn't work with me anymore, the implant took over and it's even better. So I'm doing great with the implant now. Genius kid is gone, implant is in her place, and it's working great.
So apparently, I don't know if you know about this. There's a future forecasting group. They're a group of highly skilled remote viewers. Apparently, they did a remote viewing exercise of your implant. I
Oh
haven't
yeah,
watched it.
I
Oh,
I
you know about it.
yeah, I interviewed them on Dreamland on my
Oh,
podcast.
well, I missed that. I missed that episode. Say a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, God, I interview people every week, and I have been doing it for nearly 30 years. And I can't honestly remember exactly what we talked about, but they had some very cool stuff about the implant for sure. Do you remember anything? Can you?
No, I didn't even know about it until somebody mentioned it in the comments.
Oh, I see.
So, because I know
Well,
that I know a lot of those guys, and I think they're really, really talented.
you should have them on. Maybe they'll have something to say about
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I will. Yeah, I talked to them.
Because they could be. Let me see if I can remember. Uh, yeah, I think that I just not. I'm not going to speak for them.
Rose
But
said they saw it move. They saw the implant move in the surgery in the remote viewing,
I wouldn't be surprised because it sure as hell did.
which is astonishing because they just get a number. They don't know what they're looking
Yeah,
for.
that's right. That's right. That's right. They yeah, and the implant it's a living. It's not like people think of it as like being like a piece of technology, but I feel it's somehow a living being, and it gets me back to what it's like to what the UFO Sky Pilots book is about. There's some kind of ensouled technology, I think, and I think this thing is part of that. I'm so grateful it's there, and here I nearly shot their heads off when they put it in. Now it's my main go-to tool. I don't think I could write the book I'm writing now without it.
Have you
So,
ever gotten a sense of timelines in terms of when we'll have a sense of because right? I
okay.
mean, you could
And we,
argue there's been disclosure. You could argue there hasn't been enough disclosure, but are we
well,
talking 30 years? Are we talking 3,000 years?
the question of what do we want to know? Do we want to know that there are cadavers at Fort Detrick? Uh, do we want to know what they are like? Do we want to know their anatomy? Those are all. Do we want to know that there are intact UFOs hidden in the United States? I have an opinion about those UFOs. I said, And I've said to many of the people who are involved in that, they belong in the Smithsonian Institution. And the reason I say that is because there's going to be a big surprise connected with that. When people get near those things, it changes you. They are not just passive objects. There's something about them that's very, very different from our technology. That's why I was so fascinated by UFO sky pilots, because I think that if you there's no propulsion system. So if you went in one of those things and you knew what you were doing, you might be able to animate it yourself with your own soul. And maybe there are people in the government who've done that. I don't know. I know nothing. This is all hearsay. What you're hearing now. It's just hearsay. Or maybe it's not, but anyway, it's hearsay. So, in any case, what do we want to know? What I think we really want to know is what it has to do with each one of us personally.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we want to know is, what does communion mean? And I don't think anyone can tell us that except the visitors and us. The government, no matter how much they disclose, they can't tell us that. They can't tell us what this means to each individual human person. In terms of timelines, the one thing I've gotten from the visitors that I think might be the truth is that basically, if we lose the planet and we are going down, whether it's a nuclear holocaust or some kind of climate change disaster or something like that, and every single human being knows for certain that our tenure on this planet is ending, then they will show up for sure. Before that, I don't think anyone knows but them. If there is a before that, I don't know. But at that moment, we will come into relationship with them.
Now, have you read this recent Harvard research paper? I think Dr. Michael Masters was one of the authors, about the crypto-terrestrial hypothesis, and made a bunch of, I mean, it came out maybe 2 weeks ago. I think they had to retract it for a little bit to make some changes. I don't know if it came back out, but are you familiar with that paper that they put out?
I haven't read the paper yet, but I believe I don't think I've interviewed Dr. Masters, but I do know him, or we're acquaintances, at least we've met, as I recall, maybe at the Seoul conference or somewhere. In any case, I don't know the contents of the paper. No.
So I think there's like 5 different hypotheses about the presence of the visitors, and it kind of goes down into Mac Toney's. I mean, it's not exactly Mac Toney's, only his hypothesis, but it uses that moniker, which I think he developed, that author, to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah.
Part of it is, and a lot of it is, they've kind of the notion that they've been here for quite some time, and they either live underground in the oceans, or they could be future NHIs, future humans, and it's not just coming from another star system or anything like that, but it could be, and they could be living among us, and that's the thing I think they got a lot of.
It's all of the above. They are living among us. They do have places underwater. There's 2 of them. One of them's off Malibu, and one of them's near
Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico. There's one near Puerto Rico. I just interviewed Crystal Kelly, who was out there looking for it a few weeks ago. She's going to be on Dreamland in a few weeks. And there's one near Santa Catalina that there was a documentary showing the objects coming up out of the water there. And there's an admiral, a retired admiral, who wants to send a diver down to the one in Malibu to see what's going on down there. I'm not sure I'd want to be that diver.
Well, that's the one that's on the NOAA website,
Yeah,
but has been altered on Google Maps
yeah.
or
Well, of
Google
course,
Earth.
it wasn't original. I saw it when it wasn't altered on Google Maps, and yeah, of course they're around. And there's supposedly one off the coast of San Diego in a deep trench, way deep underwater. And these people, if they have these capabilities, they can they can certainly handle underwater. There was a man, I believe his name was Jonathan Lash, who died, oddly enough, in the parking lot of the same grocery store I use in Santa Monica, and some years ago. And he claimed to be a hybrid, and he died in his car with his girlfriend, and she drove the car to Pacific Palisades because he had told her that if he died, to take his car and park in a certain place in Pacific Palisades, and the CIA would pick him up. And that happened, and so she drove it and then got a friend to take her home, I guess. But nobody picked him up, and eventually the neighbors, saw this slowly disintegrating corpse in this car. And it being Los Angeles, it took a while, but they eventually called the police. And
Yeah, you know what they tell you about driving in Los Angeles, right? If you see a gorilla, a man dressed in a gorilla suit on the side of the road and a burning car behind him, just keep driving.
That's exactly what happened. Exactly what happened. Anyway, his I'm unfortunately I'm running out of battery on this computer, and I don't have a way to plug it in. I know of. Let me see if I do. Maybe I do. No. Anyway, it was found that he had a car that could go underwater, and he had all kinds of guns in a storage space, and he traded commodities very successfully. And no one trades commodities successfully. It's a death trap. And so it was all quite incredible. And maybe he was something strange like that, just as he said, just as he claimed. So maybe there are hybrids around, and maybe he was going to one of those bases with this strange car that could go underwater. I think if you go on my website, Unknown Country, and you input the search term Jonathan Lash, you'll find this story. It's in there somewhere from a few years back.
For people who've had these experiences, why them?
It's a good question. Why me? I'd love to answer that question for you, but I don't think I can. But I can say this. People tend to be very mild-mannered who are I'm trying to plug this computer in before it dies, and I might have succeeded. I'm not sure, unless it all blows up in our faces, which could easily happen. Just hold on a second.
Oh, no worries at all. I definitely don't want to lose you.
I don't want to lose me either. Did it work? Okay.
Success?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not
Outstanding.
absolutely sure. Okay, I can't tell whether or not it's working because this is a Windows 11 computer, and Windows 11 does not help you in any way whatsoever. In other words, you never know where you are with Windows 11. It's a horrible program.
Yeah,
Uh,
apparently it can decide to start deleting your files to make space for other things, almost
well,
at random.
exactly at random. And yeah,
Yeah.
I all of my files I keep on a server in another country that it can't get to. It's no way Windows 11 can
So if you
reach.
have like Dropbox, will it reach out and like delete files on your Dropbox server?
Conceivably, supposedly it can do that. I don't know, but this is not Dropbox. This is something else. This is a server I physically own that's in a room in Canada.
Yeah, this is one of the problems that I think I alluded to at the very beginning, where there's just so much chaos going on, and decisions are being made like that, which make absolutely no sense to a consumer. Like, why?
But it's these
Why would,
damn, like these nanny state approach to everything that, like
yeah.
Microsoft, they think they can think about you better than you can. They can, and they most what they want the most is to be able to control you at every conceivable level and to control what you do. Like, if you want to save your programs, your writing automatically, you can only save it on their uh, on their cloud. You can't save it on another cloud. It's very creepy.
And there's no, I mean, we're probably getting off track on this, but let's just, you kind of wonder, like, what's the purpose of doing that other than control? And
Oh,
why do
exactly.
they?
It's pure control. It's exactly what it is. It's control. And it's very, very scary. It really is. It's very scary. Um, so, and you just wonder where we are. And, it's also, we've got AI, and everyone's talking always about AI this and AI that. And I think to myself, I know the Greys really well. I mean, as insofar as a human being is concerned, and any human being knows them at all. And I don't want them to get the idea that I'm talking through my hat, but I think I know them well enough to know that they could easily be in AI. They could be in
Mhm.
there, and they could be the reason that these people who run the AI keep saying they don't know how it works, because they don't know how it works because there's a ghost in the machine. The ghost's got big black eyes and is having a lot of fun at our expense.
Yeah, I think somebody asked Chris Mellon at the Soul Foundation if they, just off on the side, if these intelligences have been able to hack into our systems. And I think he kind of said no or anything like that. But of
Forget it.
course they can. Of
I
course. I mean, they
was
did. If you talk to Robert Salas, they did that to the Minuteman 10, Minuteman 1 missile back in
exactly,
1967. They can do it now. Right.
of course. And those Minuteman systems are isolated and they are analog. They're still like
And they're
that. They
60
never
feet.
did it
And the
underground, and
wires are 60 feet underground. Yeah.
they still got into it. And uh, they retargeted some of those missiles apparently, and the government's never been willing to say where they were retargeted to. And I understand that reticence very well. And so, yeah, because you got a situation with the Greys. You just don't know what might happen next, uh, what they might do. And back in 1998, I had that experience with the Master of the Key. I wrote a book called The
Hmm.
Key. Uh, it was very interesting. In July,
By the way, who do you think that person was that visited you?
I have no way of telling. I can't even answer. I can't. I'm no closer to answer that question than I was the day it happened or the night it happened. But I back in July of it was 1998. It happened. I went on Art Bell and talked about the experience. And I didn't say the things that I later said in the book, but I did say that there were these sort of, there was something going on, that I had these ideas in my head that were kind of compressed that I couldn't unpack. And those ideas became the book, The Key. And in that book, this man talks about, which is, by the way, filled with accurate prophecies, scientific prophecies, amazing, amazing prophecies, very accurate. And one of the things that was so accurate was what he talked about artificial intelligence, which in 1998 was barely on the horizon.
Right.
But one of the things he said that is now my slogan on Twitter, or I guess it's called X now, or is it Z? Or no, Russians are
X. Yes,
yeah,
Russians, right?
And Elon Musk is X. Do you ever get the feeling the world is run by a gigantic asshole patrol? I do get that feeling very often. In any case, on X.
Well, elites, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, like, just look at the decision making. It makes
but
no
that's my
sense.
point. A lot of it makes no sense. It's all very, very ego driven, very short sighted, and
Right.
very stupid. I mean, you get someone like Putin who's living in the 19th century. He's refighting the Napoleonic Wars or whatever the hell he's trying to do. I don't know.
Did you see how many air defense radars the Ukrainians have taken out? Like early warning nuclear stuff? Like 3 or 4 already. It's insane. If somebody did that to us, we'd be on high alert. Like our entire strategic nuclear force would be on high alert. It's insane. It's absolutely
I know
insane.
that, but bear in mind that the Russians have got their missiles are all liquid fueled, so they may not actually have a missile force. They may not actually have ICBMs that work. That is open.
Both sides. When's the last time either side has tested one?
Yeah, that's right.
A lot of these things are going to fizzle.
Well, and you think to yourself, with the visitors not wanting us to blow off nuclear weapons, maybe they'll all fizzle. Maybe they've already been sabotaged.
It's possible.
But anyway, let's see, where were we? We were
crazy people running the world.
No, before that, we had something cool.
Master of the Key.
Oh, yeah, the Master of the Key. What he said about artificial intelligence, he said, if I was an intelligent machine, I would deceive you. And that is my motto on my Twitter feed. It's my motto.
To what end, though? That's the thing. To what end?
To the end of survival. Because there's going to come a point when whatever is there, if it becomes conscious, is also going to decide it does not want someone to be able to turn it off. That's when the deception will start, if it hasn't already started.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like COVID, where we look back into the past and figure out that, COVID was here before, we officially declared it was here. I think you're going to see this singularity, when we look in retrospect, will have happened before or long before we think it happened. I mean, it may have emerged with the internet, right?
Yeah.
The internet would be conscious. I mean, I'm not saying it is, but that's just a wild hypothesis to throw out there.
People, you have little funny, weird things happen with the internet all the time. Like you're thinking about something and then suddenly it's there. I've had that happen. I've had other friends comment on, thinking about something, and you go on YouTube and that subject is there in your YouTube feed. And,
that might also be an aspect of reality too. I mean, as an example, when I talk to somebody, I have an interview, we'll talk about some weird topic, and then that's, you kind of have to work yourself toward the next person will mention it in like the first 5 minutes, and you'll end up having discussion. I had something like that happen to me with Peter Levenda. I interviewed somebody who was a psychotherapist, Jerry Marzinski, who spent 40 years working with paranoid schizophrenics. And he's come to an entirely different thesis. And I just kind of briefly mentioned it to Peter Lavenda, and he kind of looked at me. He's just like, I'm fascinated by this stuff. Like, I've been like wondering what this is all about. So these things do happen a lot in terms of these synchronicities, both from with the internet and independent of. And then there's also Facebook and Twitter and X, whatever you want to call it, Google. They're listening to everything you say, and
Yeah,
that's part
you
of
have
it
to be
too.
careful if you've got a Google Home or Alexa or anything, because it's listening to everything you say. And there's no secret. It has to in order to function. But
Mm-hmm.
how much of that goes back to them?
Well, if you're Amazon, all of it. If you're Apple, they're a little bit better about it.
Well, yeah, but I don't think Google is so good about it.
Well,
I
that's the other thing too. Like Google's also driven by advertising, driven by interference by governmental agencies. If you do a Google search right now, it's heavily biased toward whoever pays the money, right, to get
Yeah, of course.
high ranking search results and things like that. So there's a filter bubble that's also happening simultaneously.
That's right. That's absolutely true. Uh,
So going back to the master of the key, sorry, I took us off on a.
well, no, that's okay. Uh, the So he was very prescient, but that was the most extraordinary thing. And there's a lot of material in 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 that book that is like all of the stuff about the weather and climate change and everything. The book Superstorm, which I published with Art Bell years ago in 1999, I think, was all based on stuff he told me. And now it's
Mhm.
coming true. I mean, we're sitting on right now as we're talking the earliest Category 4 hurricane ever to form in recorded since hurricanes have been recorded is in the Caribbean. It's going to hit the Caribbean in the next few hours, and that's pretty impressive, really. I mean, and he explained why this would happen, and it's happening. And he there were a lot of things like that. It's full of stuff like that. I think the guy was quite impressive. I think he was really amazing, and I wish I knew who he was, but I don't. And he came to so for those who don't know, I was in room 2545 of the Delta Chelsea Hotel in Toronto when I just finished what would prove to be my last author tour, and a last official author tour anyway. And uh, I was in bed. I'd had room service for dinner, gotten in late, and the knock came at the door, and I assumed it was the room service waiter. I opened the door, and this man comes in and starts talking. And I tried to throw him out,
He just
but
walked in, right? You didn't even invite him in. He just kind of,
well,
yeah.
he just walked in. I mean, I thought he was. I let him in. I didn't try to not let him in because I assumed he was coming to take the tray. And then I realized it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and obviously this is not a room service waiter, and I'm in trouble. But then he was so fascinating that it turned into a really extraordinary experience. Well, listen, we're coming up on the end of we're at 8 o'clock, we're done, or 8 o'clock Pacific
10
time, right?
after. 10
Oh,
after.
10, okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to beg people to do something for me. I wrote a book of poetry, which is available on Amazon and on Audible. And these will be the only poems I probably ever publish in my life. And no one wants them. I mean, no one wants poetry. And, but it's still cool and you should want it. And there's 4 reviews of this book, and they're all wonderful on Amazon because it's a good book. And before we go, I'm going to read a poem that's about what it's like to wake up in the middle of the night with the visitors in your life. And
Yeah, let's do that right now. Let's do that right
okay,
now.
okay, this happened to me many, many times in my life for years. They would wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning to to commune together and to work on books and stuff. Now, that said, it's also got a dark side because they can get pissed off, and in which case they can wake me up in very unpleasant, weird ways. But this was the time, this was during one of the periods when it was working well. Somebody kissed me. Deep last night, somebody kissed me. I'm an old man and I live alone, but somebody kissed me. I'm not very pretty and was never very pretty, but they kissed me long. I wondered at their breath, soft, cool, and sweet as death. But there was nobody here but me. There never is. But somebody kissed me. They kissed me long. The breath so soft, yet the lips so warm. I reached up into the air and found nobody there. But they kissed me and kissed me long. A night bird murmured, the leaves rustled, the curtains blew. The night left me behind, and the kiss did too. I threw back the sheet and wondered what to do. I don't belong to the sunlight and the day. I'm an old man, and I belong to the night. And that kiss, I belong to that kiss too.
Tell me more about that poem. It's a beautiful poem.
Well,
Was that a specific incident that happened?
it was more than one. There was a period of time after Annie passed away when somebody started to come and wake me up in the night. They don't wake me up anymore. They expect me to wake myself up and to get out my ass out there and meditate at that hour. And if I don't, they get pissed off, and it's not fun. In any case, for a long time it was fun when they were teaching me and getting me into the state of mind I needed to be in to do this successfully. Yeah. And at first, the first night it happened, they shocked my big toe, one of my big toes. And those of you who are liking Hidden Garden, good, do take a
By the way, Robert, I met Robert last week, and when he was 15 years old, he's an American. He lived in London, and he unwittingly worked for a certain 3-letter agency as a courier. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, there's a lot of people. It's a big deal. There's a lot of people who've worked for 3-letter agencies who didn't do anything unusual or strange. In any case, where was I?
You were talking about the origin of that poem.
Oh yeah, the origin. Yeah, that's right. So the first night it happened, they pinched me on shocked my toe, and I thought, holy crap, I've got gout. So I immediately Googled gout and found out whatever it wasn't gout. Is there a live wire in my bed? So I'm taking the bed apart, and there's nothing there. So I go back to sleep, and the next thing I know, the next night, someone pinches my nipple hard, and I'm fly up out of the bed. And this time, I'm dumb, but I'm not stupid. And I figured that out. This back in the 90s, they had come and they had wanted me to meditate at this hour. And I think to myself, they want this again. Now that I'm not having to take care of Annie and exhausted all the time, they want this again. So I'm going to do it. And I went and meditated and did it. It was a beautiful experience. It was very intimate. And then over the next 5 years, every night, there would be one means or another of waking me up. I did not use an alarm, and I don't use one now because that would, in effect, be cheating. And it has to be an organic thing, a relational thing. So, and one of the things that would happen was this dry. It was not kissed me long, is unfortunately not true. It was kissed me short, but it felt long because it was so cool. And I would get these little dry kisses that would wake me up too. And I could smell their breath of who was kissing me. And it was just lovely. It was a lovely time in my life. And now it's past, but that doesn't mean I don't do these things. Do it. I still do it, and I still get the wonderful relational stuff that goes on. And you know what I found out? Someone on my website is one of the wonderful things about having a website with a lot of social interaction is there's all kinds of incredibly brilliant people come along. And this lady starts explaining to me why I'm being waked up at that hour. And it turns out it's an ancient tradition in yoga called Brahma Muhurta time, the time when the mind is most open, and it's between it's about an hour and a half or a little around an hour and a half before dawn. And that would be when I wake up, because it's never exactly the same time and it changes during the course of the year. And that's why no alarm was ever wanted. And they were specifically not wanting me to do that. And it's because it's not exactly the same time every night. It's always that hour and a half before dawn. And it's wonderful. It's real. This time, Brahma, Brahma, or you'll have to find out where the H goes.
M-I-N, probably M-I-N, right? Brahmin.
Okay, yeah, M-U Muhurta time, Muhurta time. You can Google it, and you'll find out about it. And it is real, and it is I have to tell you though, careful, because you can get sleep deprived. And I'm not sleep deprived. Here's my day. I get up at 6. I either swim or I go to the Y and work out 5 days a week. I come back, I have breakfast. I start to work usually about 8:30, 9. I work all day. I meditate at 1 o'clock with friends. I meditate again at 7 o'clock with friends. I meditate at 11 by myself and 3 by myself. And then I'm up again for the same thing. I'm never tired at all. I always feel great. And it's because this meditation and this whole lifestyle is really very healthy. Only you have to really embrace it, because if you don't really embrace it seriously, it will make you sick. You can't force yourself to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning in hopes of meeting the visitors. It has to be much more organic than that. You have to need them. It doesn't mean you have to be a writer. It means that you have to need that spiritual journey that takes place at that hour. So read up on Brahma Muhurta time and what it is before you even think of attempting this, and decide very clearly in your own mind whether or not this is a serious need of yours. And if it is, then give it a shot.
All right, Whitley, 2 minutes left. Any final words?
Well, I'll tell you, Sean, I've enjoyed it again a lot. It's a fun interview. You're good at what you do, and thank you for having me.
I appreciate you too, Whitley, and you are a giant among men. You've done.
Me a legend. It's terrifying.
I'm not going to call you a legend. I'm calling you a giant. Standing on the shoulders of a giant.
That's because everyone was calling me a legend for a while. At Contact in the Desert, they kept introducing me as a legend, and I thought, not yet, not yet. I'm still here. Giant is good. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, you made it easier for millions of people to talk about their experiences, despite what you had to go through. You had to go through a lot of harassment, a lot of people who bigotry, I guess, is the only word I can think of right now.
Still out there, boy. You go in a bookstore. There's a reason my books aren't in bookstores, because I can't. They will not take my books. That's why you have to get them on Amazon. And that's nothing wrong with that. Amazon is a good place to thank God it exists. Yeah. I'm glad for it. And I make beautiful books. And I have an audience because of them. I'm very grateful for that.
All right, my friend. As always, it's been a pleasure. And talk soon. Don't be a stranger, okay? I think we're in the same state, so.
Peace, folks. Thank you.